Welcome to In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska. We're continuing the thesis paper written by Philip Karabot from King's College London on aspects of the Hellenization of Greek Macedonia, 1912 to 1959, as part of the Cambridge Papers in Modern Greek, published in 2005. So part 3 is the following part. I refer you to table 5, which we began to read, contained in this paper on page 43 of the paper. And it refers to 3 columns. The first column is titled Articles on Private Education Establishments in the 1911 and 1927 Constitutions, according to Alexos, 1979, pages 149, 166, and 173 to 174 is the reference provided by Philip Karabot in his paper. The second column refers to key articles of the Minorities Treaty. And the third column relates to assessment of Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And in our previous recording, that is part 3, I think we did refer to column 1 in full. Nevertheless, I'd like to reread that section, and then we'll continue with the second column and the third column, which contain a lot more information. So column 1, articles on private educational establishments in the 1911 and 1927 constitutions. Article 107, only in the 1911 Constitution. The official language of the state is that in which the Constitution and legislative texts are written. Any intervention seeking to corrupt it is prohibited, it says. Article 16 / paragraph 3 and Article 23 paragraph 3 says individuals and legal entities are allowed to found private educational establishments which operate according to the Constitution and the laws of the state. Of course, here we are talking about the state being Greece, according to Philip Karabot. So that's what Philip has in this table 5 under column 1. Now, under column 2, key articles of the Minorities Treaty. And you would have heard me read about the Minorities Treaties in the previous parts of these recordings. So it says, Article 7, paragraph 4, no restriction shall be imposed on the free use by any Greek national of any language in private intercourse, in commerce, in religion, in the press, or in publications of any kind, or at public meetings. Paragraph 5 of that same Article 7, referred to just now, says, notwithstanding any establishment by the Greek government of an official language, adequate facilities shall be given to Greek nationals of non-Greek speech for the use of their language, either orally or in writing before the courts. Article 8, Greek nationals who belong to racial, religious, or linguistic minorities shall enjoy the same treatment and security in law and in fact as the other Greek nationals. In particular, they shall have an equal right to establish, manage, and control at their own expense charitable, religious, and social institutions, schools, and other educational establishments, with the right to use their own language and to exercise their religion freely therein. So that was Article 8 under the Minorities Treaty. Minorities Treaty was the one that came as a result of the League of Nations agreement. Article 9 of that same treaty, Greece will provide in the public educational system in towns and districts in which a considerable proportion of Greek nationals of other than Greek speech are resident the next page, 45 page, under this same column, it refers to adequate facilities for ensuring that in the primary schools, the instruction shall be given to the children of such Greek nationals through the medium of their own language. This provision shall not prevent the Greek government from making the teaching of the Greek language obligatory in the said schools. In towns and districts where there is a considerable proportion of Greek nationals belonging to racial, religious, or linguistic minorities, these minorities shall be assured an equitable share in the enjoyment and application of the sums which may be provided out of public funds under the state, municipal, or other budgets for educational, religious, or charitable purposes. The provisions of this article apply only to the territories transferred to Greece since January the 1st, 1913. In that same table 5, column 3, to the right of the article, of the table, I beg your pardon, titled Assessment of Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this comes from the United MFA Memorandum from 1921. And it states the following. As regards paragraph 5, the Greek government is neither thinking to nor can appoint in each court as many translators as the number of linguistic idioms that are spoken in the new lands they acquired since the beginning of 1913 with the partitioning of Macedonia. Therefore, and for the time being, it will confine itself to the appointment of translators of Turkish, which is the most widespread language after Greek, they say. Concerning Article 8, we note that the creation of propagandist centers with money sent from abroad should not be allowed. A detailed examination of funds to that effect should precede any consent to the establishment of such institutions, while a rigorous inspection of those that already exist should eliminate any foreign intervention, says the Greek government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They also say, we specifically stress that the relative application should correspond to the free will of the community and should not be the work of a few troublemakers. The provisions of Article 9, they say, especially as regards foreign-speaking Christian populations, are particularly dangerous because they could form the pretext for foreign propagandist activities. For this reason, in order to apply the provisions of this article, applications should be received from compactly settled populations via their legal representatives who should truly express the free will of the minority that they represent. That's what column 3, Assessment of Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in table 5 says. The author, Mr. Philip Karabot, in his King's College London paper titles Aspects of the Hellenization of Greek Macedonia, 1912 to 1959, he continues to write the following. As the right-hand column in table 5 suggests, the right-hand column being the one from the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Athens was not eager to execute is in quotations, execute its minority obligations vis-a-vis the Slav-speaking element. Athens was not eager to execute its minority obligations vis-a-vis the Slavic-speaking element. Seizing on the fact that the treaty as a whole neither explicitly set out the precise criteria on the basis of which a population group was to be considered a minority, nor specifically named the, in quotation, Slavophones as such, it was content to leave the matter of granting them minority groups, minority rights to their own devices. Only when taken to task did it seek to meet its obligations, albeit grudgingly. Thus, in the aftermath of the Greek assembly giving the thumbs down to the Politis-Kalfov protocol, and in response to a League of Nations request to provide information on the measures it had taken to fulfill its obligations vis-a-vis its Bulgarian minority, in quotations, Bulgarian minority. In the summer of 1925, it produced the so-called Abecedar, a primer printed in the Latin script, compiled in the Macedono-Slav dialect, and intended for use in the schools of areas with sizable Slav-speaking communities. Later in the year, the establishment of a 7-member department charged with the administration and supervision of primary education among foreign speakers in northern Greece was proposed by the Ministry of Education. This document is from AFD, it's unsigned and undated typescript. Quotes Michailidis in 1996. A336 maintains that the said department was established by legislative decree. So in the summer of 1925, it produced the so-called Abecedar, a primer. This was a publication printed in the Latin script, compiled in the Macedono-Slav dialect, Macedonoslave dialect, and intended for use in the schools of areas with sizable Slav-speaking communities. Later in the year, the establishment of a 7-member department charged with the administration and supervision of primary education among foreign speakers in northern Greece was proposed by the Ministry of Education, while on the 2nd of February 1926, the MFA sent a circular to the authorities in Macedonia informing them that Greece was obliged to set up in primary schools of Slav-speaking communities a separate class in which the language of instruction was to be the Slav dialect. Following the vehement objections of both Belgrade and Sofia and the open opposition of pro-Greek Slav speakers, the experiment with this linguistic Frankenstein, says Philip Karabot in his paper, was abandoned. It was abandoned with the blessing of the League of Nations. Henceforth, Athens would repeatedly and unequivocally states its intention to grant Slav speakers their own minority groups, albeit only if they so requested. This time around, there was not going to be any skillful and specialized work to that effect, and although not publicly admitted, any such requests, and none was forthcoming, were to be examined in light of the petitioner's law-abidingness to guard against the possibility of these schools becoming centers of Greek or anti-Greek propaganda. This is from AKK 19 Memorandum by K. Karavidas, 30th of April 1925, CF here, Table 5, says Philip Karabot in his paper titled Aspects of Hellenization of Greek Macedonia, 1912-1959. 7 years later, replying to a complaint lodged by the Bulgarian Church with the League of Nations concerning the situation of the Bulgarian minority in Greece, particularly with reference to certain questions of a religious nature, Athens reiterated the view that the Slavophones had Greek convictions, lived like good Greeks, and were peaceful and law-abiding citizens. On the vexed issue of whether religious services in churches attended by Slav speakers were conducted in the Bulgarian language as stipulated by the Minorities Treaty, his reply was both nebulous and credulous. Maintaining that religious services were always performed in the language that was in accordance with the wishes of the flock, it pointed to a government decree that allegedly forbade any prohibitions in usage of a language other than Greek. To date, no such decree has been unearthed. No such decree has been unearthed, and argued that in any case, the issue fell under the jurisdiction of autocephalous church, over which the government had no powers of intervention. That's what the government of Greece argued, says Philip. In what was yet another telling test of its resilience, the League of Nations dropped the matter altogether. Perhaps the most blatant contravention of the Minorities Treaty occurred with regard to Article 7, Paragraph 4. We've already quoted it in Table 5, and yet at the core of the whole Hellenization process lay the eradication of every trace of this barbarian-like linguistic idiom, as the prefect of Pella put it in 1921. Whether referred to as a Bulgarian, Slav, mixed Slav, or a foreign idiom, or as the Macedonian Slav, Slavo-Macedonian, or Bulgaro-Macedonian language, the Slav speaker's mother tongue was seen as a disruptive element that introduced chaotic, destabilizing characteristics in an allegedly organized world system, one that mirrored at best their fluctuating allegiance, at worst their opposition to Greek ideals. The unofficial, and with the imposition of the Metaxas dictatorship in August 1936, official banning of that repugnant foreign-like language, in quotations, writes the writer, repugnant foreign-like language, they refer to the Macedonian language, in the street, in public places, in transactions, and generally in every relevant instance, as a Metaxist enthusiast put it, came on top of concerted efforts to promote the configuring of the Macedonian landscape through the official renaming of most local Slavic and Turkish place names into Greek, an enterprise of great and urgent necessity, according to a high-ranking official of the MFA, which had begun in the late 1900s. And if one is to take at face value the allegations of Macedonian internet sites, the desecration of tombstones written in Cyrillic, and the whitewashing of similar iconography constituted an all too familiar story in post-1912 Greek Macedonia. Indeed, on 4th of January 1941, the Holy Synod sent a circular asking priests to replace remaining Slavic icons in churches with Greek ones. Such practices were in line with the Hellenization of Salonika's skyline in the immediate aftermath of the Muslim exodus and the arrival of the refugees. Writing on the demolishing of minarets on the orders of the municipality in March 1924, a local journalist stated thus: "Their threatening height will no longer intimidate us, nor remind us of the former misfortunes of our race, the frightful slavery and the suffering of their subjects. The voice of the muezzin will no longer bother our ears. Nothing at all must remind us again of the epoch of slavery." Other equally visible practices included the putting up of numerous signs in Macedonian townships and villages urging the inhabitants to speak Greek, and the refusal of postal authorities to deliver letters as long as the name of sender and addressee was in Cyrillic. An equally distinguishable practice was the naming of surnames with distinct Slavic endings into Greek ones. Personal names, particularly of Slav offspring, were also Hellenized, partly because priests acting on the orders of the church refused to baptize them with Slav ones, partly on the initiative of their parents as a means of avoiding further discrimination. As a Slav speaker from the region of Almopia recently recalled, "When I went to school, my parents changed my name. You cannot stand on your 2 feet with such a name," my mother used to say. Yet changing one's name from Petre to Petros or from Pasica to Aspasia did not result in the enhancing of Greek among Slav speakers, at least not in the short term. In the late 1940s, Slav-speaking pupils continued to converse in their mother tongue in class, incurring, like Vlach-speaking pupils in the late 1880s, the wrath and caning of their Greek teacher. Caning was just one of many penalties that Slav speakers endured during the Metaxas dictatorship if caught violating the banning order. Steep fines, drinking of castor oil, and short-term imprisonment were the norm. Internal exile was also on the cards, a practice on which the regime surpassed its predecessors. The latter, in addition to scholastically monitoring the movements and activities of Slav speakers whose sentiments they believed to be anti-Greek, and intercepting their correspondence, had on occasion resorted to sending them to internal exile on charges of supporting the Komitadis, normally for a period not exceeding 36 months, or deporting them to Bulgaria on the orders of notorious committees of public scrutiny, of public security, I beg your pardon. In the same vein, Slav speakers who had migrated to the New World and had allegedly been members of pro-Bulgarian societies and participated in the IMRO, the Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization related activities, were struck off the municipal rolls. They were struck off from the municipal rolls and stripped of their Greek citizenship on the grounds of leaving the country with no intention of returning. the 4th of August regime introduced a new element in the equation, indeed one that has endured till now, that of bracketing together Slav speakers with communism. This was no doubt because of the official acceptance by the Communist Party of Greece in early 1925 of the Comintern ruling on the right to self-determination of all nationalities of Greek Macedonia and Western Thrace, which was changed in March 1935 to full national and political equality for all national minorities within the country. In line with the regime's obsessive anti-communist hysteria, as well as its understandable Bulgarophobia given Sophia's revisionism, increasing numbers of Slav speakers were deported to remote and barren places of exile as Bulgarophiles and communists. Such harsh treatment was supplemented by a law that prohibited the settlement of foreigners and individuals of non-Greek ethnic origin in border regions such as Florina with retroactive effect. It also provided for the setting up of committees of military security charged with exiling for a period of up to 5 years individuals with or without their families who were deemed dangerous. All these practices of assimilation and intolerance and their attendant mechanisms of repression and containment did not necessarily or always set out with the homogenization of Greek Macedonia in mind, though admittedly they were used as a means to that end, writes Philip Karabot in his paper titled Aspects of Hellenization of Greek Macedonia, 1912 to 1959. This is a thesis paper published in 2005 by Cambridge Papers in Modern Greek. All these practices of assimilation and intolerance and their attendant mechanisms of repression and containment did not necessarily or always set out with the homogenization of Greek Macedonia in mind, though admittedly they were used as a means to an end. I reread that sentence for you. Compared with those carried out by Belgrade vis-a-vis its own pro-Bulgarian Slav speakers in Yugoslav Macedonia, or by Sofia vis-a-vis its few remaining Greek-speaking citizens, those of Athens were probably less severe, at least until the advent of Metaxas to power. By the same token, the treatment meted out to pro-Romanian Vlach speakers in Macedonia and Epirus was benevolent when compared to that experienced by Slav speakers. By the end of the interwar period, when according to the official census of 1940, the Vlach-speaking population of the country numbered 53,997 souls, there were as many as 22 primary and 3 secondary Vlach minority schools attended by around 1,300 pupils, principally funded and partly staffed by Bucharest. The authorities considered such establishment hotbeds of Romanian propaganda, which it was argued set a bad precedent as Bulgarian propaganda employs the example of the Romanian minority in order to kindle and preserve the old demand of the schismatic Slavophones for the recognition of a Slavophone Bulgarian minority. Exaggerated as such concerns may have been, inasmuch as some 8,000 pro-Romanian Vlachs had left for the Dobruja in 1925 and 26, and another 2,000 in 1932 and 1933 in the context of an agreement on unilateral emigration between the two countries that Athens keenly sought to promote on occasion, they even led to tampering with the official correspondence of the secretary of the Romanian embassy in Athens at the request of the MFA itself. More importantly, perhaps, they are indicative of the mainstream perception of the time, wherein each and every element of Orthodox Christian otherness is in brackets, in quotations, was seen as incompatible with Greek nationhood, the desire to assimilate, if not eradicate it, being at the end of the day the norm. By contrast, the incongruity of the non-Greek Orthodox other called neither for its assimilation nor for its eradication, but for its integration. This was particularly evidenced in the case of the sizable Sephardic Jewry, the Jewish Sephardic community of Macedonia, principally located in Salonika. Except for a number of measures designed to diminish their hold over the economic and political life of the city, the appropriation of their age-old cemetery, and a few instances of anti-Semitism from below, culminating in the pogrom of June 1931. The state fulfilled its international obligations concerning the minorities' civic, religious, educational, and cultural rights to a great extent, at least as far as Balkan and Central European standards were concerned. Given the leverage of the Jewish diaspora worldwide, the highly stratified and well-organized structure of the community, as well as the urban milieu in which it operated, there was only so much leeway for applying measures and employing mechanisms of homogenization. In the event, even the integrationist enterprise was rendered meaningless, as the Sephardic Jews of Salonika and other Macedonian towns were to be virtually wiped out by the Nazis during the Second World War, with the tacit complicity of local Greek authorities acting against the directives and orders of the collaborationist government in Athens. Now, this was the fourth part of the paper titled Aspects of the Hellenization of Greek Macedonia 1912 to 1959. We shall continue with part 5, which will be the final part of this paper written by Philip Karabot, King's College, London, back in 2005 as part of the Cambridge Papers in Modern Greek. So until then, thank you for listening, and please do listen to the parts, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and part 5 in that order, and decide what you think of this paper and the contents of it therein. Because in this paper, dear listeners and watchers of In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska, we have a lot of facts, a lot of historical facts, and also the Greek government's colonization of what is Macedonia, has always been, and the Macedonian people living in their land. So thank you once again, and shortly you'll be able to hear part 5 as well. Till then, bye for now.